Pushing for independence after Brexit, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says Scotland has the right to decide its future. She argues the divorce with the EU happened against the will of the country. So can Scotland become independent? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. After 8 months of negotiations and 7 days before the Brexit deadline, the European Union and the UK finally reached a trade and security deal. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson calls it an agreement that will help the UK take control of its destiny. But in Scotland, pro-independence leader Nicola Sturgeon says it's time for the country to become an independent European nation. The First Minister tweeted that what's happening is against Scotland's will. In the 2016 Brexit referendum, 62% of voters in Scotland opted to remain in the EU. Since then, calls for independence have grown. But Boris Johnson rejects the demand. Now Sturgeon party is expected to head into next year's Holyrood elections, seeking a new mandate for a second independence vote. But will an independent Scotland be allowed to join the EU? Brexit changed the debate over an independent Scotland. It's been 6 years since Scots voted 55 to 45% to reject sovereignty in a referendum. This year, polls indicated support for independence reaching 58%. That's attributed to the success of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon in controlling the coronavirus compared to what's happened in England. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has rejected a new referendum saying Scotland voted to stay in the UK in 2014. Several EU foreign ministers have made it clear an independent Scotland would need to apply to get back in. In Scotland's capital city, Edinburgh, many described feelings of fatigue and dismay over Brexit even after the deal was reached on Christmas Eve.
I think it makes me feel relieved because over the past couple of weeks there's been just so much hype and misinformation in the media. And then I guess all the queues at Dover and, you know, the threat that we might have restrictions in terms of the food that we have. So hopefully it will get rid of all of that and I'll get rid of a lot of the uncertainty. But personally, I would prefer Scotland to be part of Europe. So that's the way I'm going to vote in future. I'll vote for independence and for Scotland to be part of the European Union in future.
I hate Brexit. I think it's a completely retrograde step. I can remember life before we joined Europe, and I remember things getting better in every way. I think the feeling of being part of a multinational, international, outward-looking community, I think has been absolutely fantastic. I've always been very excited by everything about being in Europe.
Let's introduce the panel. In London, Hussein, a political commentator and former special advisor at the UK Home Office. In Brussels, Karel, Lannoo, CEO at the Centre for European Policy Studies. And in London, Jonathan List, a policy analyst and deputy director at the British Influence. Welcome to you all. Mo, the general sentiment in Scotland, which seems to be now moving towards splitting away from the Union, is it a momentary rejection of Brexit or a dynamic shift?
I think the polls would suggest that there has been this sentiment growing over the last year or so. I mean, Brexit, you know, we've been talking about this for nearly 4.5 years now in the UK. So I think any impact of Brexit we would have seen factored in already. Over the last year, you've seen this huge COVID pandemic that all four governments of the UK have been grappling with. I think it's given Nicola Sturgeon much more of a platform. Scotland controlled its own health service. She's been doing daily briefings. So I think how she seemed to be responding to COVID has maybe in some people's minds made her seem to come across as more of a leader and somebody who potentially could lead an independent country. But I do think they are two separate things. The context has been quite different, but the Brexit argument, I think, has been going on for quite a long time. So I'm not sure if there was no deal, that would make a bigger impact and bigger difference and cause much more damage. Because there is a deal and we need to see what the details are. I'm not sure it will make as big a dent into the polls as we've seen so far.
Karel, I mean, even with the trade deal, there is this prevailing sentiment that the Scots find themselves in an uncharted territory. Do you think this is why one of the main reasons why people feel like they have been somehow hijacked by the Brexit architects?
Yes, to some degree, but Scots are only a minority, a big minority in the UK. They're about 5 million. So if there ever were to be another referendum, it would be a referendum from the whole of the UK. And then, let's say, they would have to agree. The whole of the UK would have to agree with eventually the Scottish leaving. I do not see it in another way. But I think, let's say, we'll have to see first how this new deal will work and how the overall economy, how people will react to this in the coming weeks and months. And then we can see, let's say, whether there will be a new call, let's say, for independence in Scotland. But I'm sure it will not go away, because if you look at, basically, the deal has been about two big things, goods and services. And for goods, there will not be customs. Basically, there will be a customs control, but there will not be tariffs. So the goods will enter into the UK freely. And since the UK has a trade deficit for goods, I mean, you will see even more goods flowing in the UK. For services, on the other hand, which is the export product of the UK and also the export product of Scotland, I mean, there the tariffs do not apply. There are other rules which will apply, which will prevent services from being exported from the UK. So I think we could see on the medium term or on the longer run some problems for the UK economy in continuing to export their services, certainly to Europe.
And this explains, I think, the anger of the Scots. And let me go to Jonathan. Jonathan, the moment Boris Johnson announced the trade deal, the people in Scotland said that the government has betrayed the Scots in the sense that their premium exports now to the EU will have to suffer because there will be extra costs and they will definitely have to lose the competitive edge they used to have in the past.
Yes, but I don't think that's the main reason for Scottish anger over the last few years. Obviously, it's a contributory factor. I think it's much more political than economic. So Scotland has been rebuffed at every stage for the last 4.5 years. So a majority of Scots, as we know, voted to stay in the European Union, 62% to 38%, which is more than voted to stay, a bigger percentage than voted to stay in the United Kingdom, which is only 55 to 45. So you might say the European Union is the more popular union of the two in Scotland. And the Scottish government put forward a proposal to stay in the single market in 2016, and that was dismissed out of hand by the UK government, which made no effort to compromise whatsoever. So the Scots have felt that their views have not been taken into account, they haven't mattered, and that, I think, is the main reason behind this spur for independence, which is now running at 58% in the polls, which is a very, very hard deficit to claw back.
Mo, if you look at the politics now in Scotland, there's this battle of narratives. The pro-independence leaders saying that the trade deal is not good for Scotland. The Conservatives, on the other hand, saying that the agreement protects the products of Scotland. This narrative itself between the pro-independence and those who would like to remain within the Union, how likely is it to shape the future of Scotland? And who is likely to prevail?
Yeah, I think it will be an ongoing discussion, certainly as we head to the expected elections in May. And I think you do have to clearly position things differently and have different points of view that you are trying to make and trying to get across. You know, on the one hand, there'll be the unionist argument, which will talk about the fact that actually now is not the time to be talking about independence. We already have had 4.5 years of torturous Brexit negotiations. We're trying to deal with a pandemic. And it's actually because of the United Kingdom that we've had this furlough scheme, which has protected nearly 800,000 jobs in Scotland. We're one of the first countries in the world to have a vaccine, which people in Scotland are benefiting from. So there are arguments around the issue we're facing as a country now to deal with. And then you will have the SNP side and the nationalist side that will make the case because of Brexit and because of the Brexit deal that has been struck. There are people who voted against Brexit across the whole of the UK. It isn't just in Scotland. So I think it's slightly misreading the situation just to think that if you want independence, you automatically are for anti-Brexit. You can be an internationalist, so you can want to ideally be back in the EU, but you can also want to be part of the United Kingdom. It shouldn't be one union against the other. So I don't think this kind of simplified argument is really going to cut through with everyone, because, on one hand, you're saying you want to rejoin the EU, but then independence would mean leaving the UK single market and having a customs border potentially at the Scotland-England border. It could mean Scotland rejoining the euro. And what would it mean for the common fisheries policy? And how would that go down with the fishing community in Scotland? So it's not a straightforward thing. There are many, many unknowns and many questions around this.
Karel, you spoke about the services that were affected by the trade deal. And when it comes to Scotland, you have the fisheries and you have agriculture, the seed potatoes exports, which are somehow the pride of the Scottish export. The GDP of the country is likely to contract by 6% in the upcoming years because of the new political reality. Isn't this on its own a strong reason for the pro-independence movement in Scotland to say it's about time to rethink where we stand and we would like to move forward?
Yes, these projections have all indicated already for the last many years, let's say, that there is that Brexit is negative. So, but we'll have to see how this will be divided over the country. It may be that London, for example, as a city and as the capital of many financial services will suffer a lot, but it may be that other parts will suffer as well. One of the bigger parts, let's say, of this agreement was also about people and the free movement of people from mainland Europe, from other European countries to the UK. And we've seen, let's say, that these people, mostly unskilled labor, let's say, were very needed for example, the agricultural sector. We'll have to see, let's say, what will be the impact of not having so easily cheap labor coming over from Europe, but also qualified labor, which probably will come in much more easily into the UK, let's say, than under the current agreement, may also not find it that interesting anymore to come to the UK. And if, for example, European capitals manage to put up a place which will be a financial center, which will be competing with London, the UK will for sure suffer. But one other thing, let's say, which we haven't mentioned is Northern Ireland. I think a lot on the Scottish reaction will depend on how the agreement will work in Northern Ireland. We know, let's say, there will be no border between Ireland and Northern Ireland as part of the deal, the withdrawal agreement, which was struck last year. This has been preserved in this agreement, even if some Conservatives were against. I mean, that means, let's say, that basically Northern Ireland is part of the EU. And there the integrity of the UK is affected. So if this works well for Northern Ireland, Scotland may slowly but certainly be starting to say, look, we want the same deal as you have with Northern Ireland. We want these goods coming into a country without any border checks, much more easily.
We'll talk more in detail about Northern Ireland later in the programme. For the time being, Jonathan, when First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says that nothing will make up for what the Brexit takes away from Scotland, is Edinburgh on a collision course with Westminster?
It absolutely is. And the fundamental problem for the UK government is that they can't say that we have the right to have our independence, the right to take back control, to determine our own future, but deny that to the Scottish people. It was made always very clear in 2014 that not only would Scotland have a bigger say over the running of the UK, there was a famous vow which was made just before the referendum in 2014 on Scottish independence, which suggested that there'd be some kind of constitutional veto. And obviously, that never took place. So the Scottish people have elected the SNP as a majority party in the last 4 elections, so 2015 in the UK general election, 2016 in the Scottish Parliament election, 2017 in the UK elections. 2019 again in the UK election, and the SNP is very likely to win a majority again next year. So how can the UK government possibly deny the Scottish people what they clearly say they want, because they've elected a party which has an independence referendum as its overarching concern? And the other point is, it's absolutely legitimate for the SNP to say that Brexit is a change of circumstance. Yes, it was agreed in 2014 that the independence referendum would be for a generation, but that was barring any major constitutional changes. Now, Brexit is a major constitutional change, and leaving the single market and customs union is an even bigger change because that alters the entire economic and commercial infrastructure of Scotland.
Mo, don't you think that this could be the right time to start rethinking the whole constitutional architecture in the UK? Because people in Scotland now are thinking there is absolutely no way we're going to move forward under the same circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I think the debate around the Constitution has been going on for a while. And I think that will just get stronger. And I know it's concerning a lot of people in Westminster and in government. And this was seen in the whole fisheries parts of the deal that has just been struck. The fisheries is a very small part of the UK economy, but politically it's really important, not just because of the sovereignty argument, but also because of the union and the impact on fishing communities in Scotland. So I think there will certainly be more thought given to further devolution of powers as a result of the powers going back from Brussels to the United Kingdom and beyond. And you saw that again from the Labour Party as well, just last week, the announcement of further work, including former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, to look at what else can be devolved. So I think there is a real concern, but I still don't think a vote for the SNP should just be seen through the prism as a vote for independence. You know, people do also vote on domestic issues as well, the bread and butter issues that matter to them. Look at the opposition in Scotland. From the Labour side, it's very weak. With Ruth Davidson leaving the Conservative side, we've got to see what happens there as well. So I don't think we can just assume a majority win for the SNP, which I guess they're very likely to get, automatically means independence at the top of everyone's list.
It remains to be seen, because when you look at the recent polls and you see what's happening, you get the impression that this is absolutely not the case. They are most likely to ride the wave on an unprecedented popularity and expand their influence and presence in the parliament. For the time being, Karel, give us an idea about the general sentiment among the EU leaders about what happens next. I think when they had struck the deal with the UK, they were thinking about teaming up with a partner for the future. But what happens when that partner breaks up into different nations?
I think overall, let's say the sentiment in the EU is, first of all, let's say it's a pity. It's I mean, that you had a member which was 47 years a member of the EU all of a sudden leaves, and it's not the first, the best member. It's a very important country. It's the third largest country of the EU, or the second largest, let's say, depending on what count you take. So it's an important member which we forget, which we lose, let's say, and which has played a very important role in framing the EU over the last 47 years, certainly in the single market, in the competition which we have, let's say, for services, for goods. I mean, certainly for services has been a very important member, but also the role of Britain internationally extremely important, let's say, and that's something which we will miss. On the other hand, of course, I think some will be happy, let's say, that we have got a deal, and that's extremely important, because until a few days ago there was a possibility there would be no deal, and it has been kept up until almost the last minute, let's say, until we heard, I think, on Christmas Eve that there was a deal, and many people even a few days before thought, let's say, there will be no deal. At least we have a deal, and there is a structure for a cooperation. There's, however, one thing which we're missing, and you refer to this in a moment. I mean, the EU is missing a very important security actor with the UK as part of the EU. Of course, the UK will be involved in NATO, and the EU is also involved in NATO, or many member states of the EU are involved in NATO. But to form a stronger security actor in Europe, we will be missing the UK, and we will have to form some form of agreement, which is not part of this agreement at the moment, with the UK to strengthen our security, for example, in the Middle East.
Jonathan, for the time being, we all boil down to what happens next in Scotland. Just for the sake of further explaining the politics in Scotland, let's map out the political, the voting landscape. Two-thirds of those who voted in 2016 said they would like to stay in the EU. Douglas Ross will find it extremely difficult to reverse the trend of the pro-independence sentiment. Who do you think will shape what happens in the upcoming months? Is it the Greens coming on together with the SNP and saying both together we can tilt the ground towards our own favour and we will move forward towards a second vote for independence?
Well, I think the SNP has a commanding lead in sort of Scotland's political polls. Nicola Sturgeon is very popular. She's seen as having managed the coronavirus crisis much better than Boris Johnson, which is part of her sort of political charisma and skill. So I don't think she needs a lot of help, to be honest. I think that she's on course to win the next election. And compared to, just to go back to what Mo was saying a moment ago, it's not saying that everyone necessarily supports independence if they vote the SNP. We know that's the case because the SNP had a majority in 2014 and they still lost the independence referendum. But what it does say is that the SNP has a mandate for its major policy, which is to have that independence referendum. And so, as you said before, there's now going to be a very, very difficult period because the SNP is going to be elected next year on this platform of holding a second referendum in the light of massive disruption to the constitution against the Scottish people's will. London is going to be saying it's not the time. You can't have the referendum because they're worried that they might lose. And they're worried about sort of the general disruption, but that's irrelevant. But the fundamental point is this is going to be a major block because there's nothing to say that Scotland can't sort of have a kind of a Catalan-style constitutional crisis. If the Scottish people vote again and again for a referendum and London doesn't give it to them, what happens then? We don't know.
I have a few time left here, and I appreciate brief answers from you, if you don't mind. Gentlemen, Mo, with the end of the transition period, what will Britain look like in the future?
That is a big question. Well, I think now we've seen the parameters of what the deal will look like. I think a lot of people will be relieved because it's not a no deal, which was a real concern for me and for many other people around the country, I'm sure. And I think actually we'll be looking much more internationally. So there's been a lot of focus on the EU, whether it's the Erasmus scheme or immigration. And I think actually we'll be looking much more globally. And hopefully by chairing things like COP26, chairing the G7, that's a real opportunity to put into practice what we mean when we talk about global Britain. So I think hopefully a more internationalist outlook is coming.
Karel, I mean, no one can ignore the impact of the laws of gravity. The Republic of Ireland is definitely going to be pulled towards the European bloc. And if Northern Ireland decides that its benefits will be decided by the Republic of Ireland, they are more likely to say, you know what, I think it's about time to join the Republic and we'll end up having a united Ireland. Will that be the pivotal moment that will decide the future of Britain?
If this were to happen, of course, this will be a disaster for Britain because there's something the Conservatives have campaigned upon, the integrity of the UK. But it's something which, according to me, is very likely to happen, say, in the coming years. It won't happen overnight or in the coming months. It's, I think, very likely to happen because if they see there is no border and there is a border with the UK, then there will be a big difference. And in the end, they will say, but in practice, we are united.
Jonathan, in less than 15 seconds, do you think that the breakup of the UK is inevitable?
It is inevitable. The Scottish people want independence. It's the rupture has already happened emotionally. The legal rupture, I think, will follow very shortly.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate your insight. Hussein, Karel, Lannoo, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Looking forward to talking to you in the near future. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem, Ahelbarra, and the entire team here in Doha. Bye for now.